The 41st millennium. A time when life is short, grim, and full of surprises. Like getting drafted into the Imperial Guard and realizing your las gun is more likely to overheat than hit anything. But hey, at least you don't have to worry about being eaten by a tyrannid or getting infected with chaos taint, right? Right? Wrong. Whether you're dodging orcs on a backwater planet, battling mutants in your local hive city, or just trying to survive the workday without a chaos cultist blowing up your local cathedral, things are never dull in the Imperium of Man. In fact, the only thing more certain than dying in the name of the Emperor is that your chances of a nice, peaceful life are about as good as a Chaos Marine deciding to take up knitting. And yet, all of this, the endless war, the constant fear, the constant pain, it wasn't always like this. 10,000 years in the past, the Imperium was at its height, led by the Emperor of Mankind and his 18 glorious sons who were leading the charge in the Great Crusade, bringing the light of humanity across the stars. Until one son decided maybe the Emperor should just eat shit and die. That son? Horus Lupercal, the greatest of the Primarchs, the Emperor's favorite son, the Warmaster, who in true heroic fashion decided to betray the Emperor, corrupt 8 of his brothers and their legions, and kick off what is known as the Horus Heresy, which would ultimately result in the current grim dark setting of the 41st millennium. Way to go, Horus. You really screwed everyone over, you bald fuck. Hey there, guys. It's your favorite corrupted cow back with another video. Today, we're tackling the ultimate question: just how powerful was Horus Lupercal? I mean, when you're the dude who kicked off the entire Horus Heresy, you've got to be pretty strong, right? Well, today we're going to do something we've all been waiting for: power scaling bald boy Horus Lupercal. Not just a quick look at his feats, but really diving into the distinct versions of Horus and how each of them differ. I will say it's hard to scale him, which is funny since he's supposed to be the big bad of the 30th millennium. I mean, for Christ's sake, it's called the Horus Heresy, but we still don't really see a ton of him in action. He mostly stays behind his desk and monologues like your typical B-list evil villain. So I had to dig through all of the Horus Heresy and Siege of Terror books just to get an answer. Through my research, yes, I am a nerd, I concluded that there are in fact 5 different variations or versions of Horus throughout the series, each representing a different point of his slow descent into chaos and his eventual death at the hands of Big Daddy E. So throughout this video, I will be analyzing each version of Horus and scaling them based on how strong I think they are. For example, base Horus is most likely between city and world level, meaning if they were dropped on a city or on a world, they could possibly destroy it due to the feats that we see throughout the books. I will also be suggesting where each version of Horus ranks in comparison with other strong characters throughout the Horus Heresy, specifically the Primarchs and obviously the Emperor. So here are the 5 versions we'll be analyzing. First, Great Crusade Horus, or as I like to call him, Base Horus. The hero of the Imperium, the perfect son, and a figure of strength and leadership that humanity could rely upon. This Horus is from the Great Crusade to his near death on the moon of Davin. This form, which I covered in my Primarch ranking video, is highly debatable, to be honest, as Horus is rarely seen in combat throughout the Great Crusade, so we'll be taking bits and pieces from one certain book to truly scale him, similar to my ranking of the Primarchs. Second, we have post-Davin Horus. After being poisoned and essentially dying, Horus is revived by the Chaos Gods upon accepting chaos and agreeing to overthrow his dad. Talk about daddy issues. This form is very similar to Great Crusade Horus, but there are some feats that we'll have to go over that show that post-Davin Horus is actually in a different league. Third, we have post-Molech Horus. This version of Horus could also be called Horus Ascended, but I feel like post-Molech really just cements where this Horus is in regard to the Horus Heresy timeline. This form of Horus obviously is after he leaves the warp gate on Molech, something the Emperor did centuries earlier to gain the knowledge to create the Primarchs from the Chaos Gods. Horus does something very similar and enters the warp gate on Molech to treat with the Chaos Gods. Upon doing so, Horus leaves the portal and is blessed by the ruinous powers, essentially becoming their chosen instrument. Horus spends the most time in this form, surprisingly, as it goes from post-Molech all the way to the book Slaves to Darkness, which occurs right before the Siege of Terra. Horus is powerful in this form, but there's an issue with him not fully giving himself to chaos, and thus these powers are not at what I like to say 100% capacity. So he's not as powerful as he truly could be in this form, and he ultimately gets wounded by Leman Russ, resulting in his coma-like state and then his transition into what I call his fourth form, Slave to Chaos Horus. This variation of Horus has completely sold his soul and has become a pawn of the Chaos Gods. Gone is the noble hero, twisted and corrupted by the ruinous powers. The Warmaster leads the traitor legions on their final steps to the throne world. This form is right after Horus awakens from his coma and has completely given himself over to the Chaos Gods, as his last resisting portion of his soul has been destroyed by the ritual of Malachurst. Fuck you, Malachurst. Horus is nearly at his strongest in this form, but reaches even greater heights during the final stretch of books, the Siege of Terra. His fifth and final form is called God Emperor Horus. The final and most dangerous form of Horus, it is at his peak of power right before his tragic end. This is the version of Horus Lupercal who faces the Emperor in their final showdown that will determine the fate of mankind. Is he a god at this point? Let's find out. Just a side note before continuing, yes, I came up with all these cool sounding names myself, so if they sound retarded to you, you're both not cool and have bad taste in names. Now, as exciting as all of this sounds, power scaling Horus is not without its problems. First, we have the issue of inconsistent sources. You see, Horus is a character who has been betrayed by many different authors across a wide range of books and stories, which often leads to conflicting feats and power levels. One novel will show him as nearly unstoppable, while another portrays him as vulnerable or even less capable in certain areas. For example, in the great book Horus Rising by Dan Abnett, Horus is depicted as a nearly perfect leader, powerful, charismatic, strategic, and is the Emperor's right hand in everything. He leads the Luna Wolves, soon to be Sons of Horus, to victory after victory, showcasing his ability to command armies and inspire loyalty. In this book, he's a towering figure and a being with the potential to match his father in power and resolve, beloved by all. But then in the sequel, False Gods, Horus is completely different. Here, he's done a 180 and is, to put it simply, an asshole. Khan is a noble character we saw in the first novel, Instead, he does things completely different and what seems to be out of character. Him easily falling to chaos, although his brother Magnus is there, doesn't really make any sense at all, and is one of the biggest issues I have with the Horus Heresy in general, as the inconsistent writing and in some cases the terrible authors really do hamstring it. This inconsistency occurs a lot with many characters, most of all Horus, as the authors intended to show the seeds of his corruption, but instead make Horus look like a fucking retard. But we're not talking about character murders today, guys. We're talking about power scaling. This too is impacted by the different authors, as each of them scale Primarchs differently. A perfect example of this can be seen with Verbute Guilliman. In one book, No Fear, he's being blown out into space and fighting without a goddamn helmet. And then in another book, Unremembered Empire, he's getting ambushed by a squad of space marines and nearly dying. So I'm going to try my best to truly scale him, although the authors are not really doing me any favors. And now we come to the second issue with power scaling, the balding menace, which is the fact that Horus doesn't exactly fight a lot. Sure, he leads the legions, gives inspiring speeches, and occasionally picks up a weapon, but compared to the other Primarchs who are out there on the battlefield constantly, like Angron, Sanguinius, or Vulcan, Horus is more of a strategist, a figurehead in the background, making grandiose plans. In the Siege of Terra, for example, Horus is mostly in the shadows, overseeing the massive war effort against the Imperium and attacking the Emperor in the Immaterial. There are very few scenes where we see him in direct combat, at least not as frequently as we see with the other Primarchs. Compare Horus to Fulgrim, who's actively involved in several major battles and duels throughout the Heresy, or Sanguinius, who faces down horrific foes during the Siege of Terra, easily allowing us to scale him. It's especially strange because you know the entire conflict we're talking about is called the Horus Heresy, but his actual physical involvement in combat is relatively low. You'd think that a guy who nearly tore the Imperium apart would be in the thick of things a bit more. The fact that he's not out there fighting all the time creates a problem when we're trying to gauge his true combat prowess. So with this said, comparable to my Primarch ranking, we will not be taking into account hearsay and statements said by few characters as truth, preferring to rather use actual combat feats and battles to correctly scale Horus Lupercal. Which brings us to the final ground rule I want to address before jumping into power scaling the Arch Traitor, which is where exactly are we pulling these feats from? Because as much as I love to guess at how powerful these characters are based on fan theories, we have to stick to the official sources. This is why I'll only be using feats from the established lore, more specifically the Horus Heresy and the Siege of Terra, as they are the clearest representation of Horus's true potential and limitations. Now, I do want to briefly touch on another variation of Horus Lupercal that we will not be going over in this video, which is Clone Horus. Now, I feel like some people are going to disagree with this opinion, but I believe that cloned Horus does not truly count as a variation of him, as it does not contain the soul of the Primarch, which the Emperor wove into each of the Primarch's mortal shells. So thus, this cloned version of Horus does not have Horus's soul, as the Emperor utterly destroyed it at the end of the Siege of Terra, and it is more of just a experiment done by Fabius Bile. So it's quote-unquote a Primarch. I want to say that it has all the physical attributes of a Primarch with none of the warp abilities of said Primarch. So it's kind of just like a flesh clone of Horus, not an exact replica, as like I said earlier, it does not have the soul of these warp beings. Thus, I'm not going to be looking at Clone Horus because in my eyes, he is not a Primarch at all, merely a replicant, a physical replicant to be more specific, without the soul juices found in the other Primarchs. So no cloned Horus today, but I'd love to do a video discussing him and why I don't think he's a Primarch in the future. Holy fuck, saying all that made me feel like a ginormous nerd. Someone put me headfirst into a toilet. Alright, we've established that power scaling Horus Lupercal is about as consistent as a guardsman retirement plan. But before jumping into all the variations of Horus Lupercal, I do want to briefly touch on Horus's weapons and armor, because to truly understand what a monster Horus is at his peak, we need to see what he brought into battle. So like I said, we're briefly going to touch on his gear and the insane feats that come with them. First off, Horus's primary weapon is his mace or maul titled World Breaker. Personally forged by the Emperor, who would later get pegged with it, World Breaker has some insane feats all by itself. Throughout the Horus Heresy, Horus uses World Breaker to slaughter hundreds, if not thousands, of Space Marines. At one point, even using World Breaker to turn a couple of Ultramarines into legit red mist. Yes, fucking red mist, as in there's nothing left but mist of blood. That's crazy. Outside of Space Marines, which tend to be fonder for Primarchs, we see Horus use this weapon to crush several Primarchs and even the Emperor himself. Quite a powerful weapon indeed. But World Breaker isn't even his most famous weapon. That title belongs to the Talon of Horus, whose current owner is the spoiler Abaddon. The Talon itself destroyed World Breaker, which was wielded by the cloned Horus. The Talon has feats similar to World Breaker, as it's Horus's chief weapon in his duel against both Sanguinius and the Emperor, piercing both of them and dealing huge mortal wounds. The Talon is shown throughout the lore to be truly nigh unstoppable when coming into combat with shields, armor, and even psychic abilities, just showing how truly dangerous it is in the hands of Horus Lupercal. Finally, Horus wears an impressive suit of armor called the Serpent's Scales, which is a proto-Terminator armor and has a massive built-in fucking force field. Yeah, dude's got all the expensive shit. Sanguinius barely penetrates this armor, which is a feat in itself, since moments earlier, Sanguinius was literally destroying Titans, greater demons, and most importantly, Demon Primarch Angron. So Horus has two broken primary weapons and an armor set that seems to be unpenetrable. Wow, that seems super duper fair. Keep this in mind when we're going through each variation of Horus. Finally, now that we've covered the potential issues, ground rules, and his broken gear, let's jump into each variation of Horus Lupercal throughout the Great Crusade till the Siege of Terra, starting with Great Crusade Horus, the hero, the Warmaster, the Emperor's perfect son before everything went horribly wrong. Ready? Let's jump into power scaling bald boy Horus Lupercal. Before he became the galaxy's biggest disappointment, Horus Lupercal was that guy. The golden child, the first among equal, the Emperor's favorite son. This version of Horus we'll be looking at will be from his discovery on Chthoniya to his near death on Davin. This Horus fought side by side with the Emperor for a great period of time during the Great Crusade, conquering entire systems in the name of the Imperium. He wasn't just a warrior, he was a tactical genius, a charismatic leader, and a PR nightmare for Xenos everywhere. And let's be honest, compared to his other brothers, he was actually pretty well adjusted. He wasn't running torture experiments like Fabius Bile's fan club. He wasn't a rage-fueled berserker like Angron, and he wasn't getting lost in the webway like Ferrus Manus's missing head. He was the Emperor's most trusted son, the Warmaster of the Imperium, and the only one actually trusted to lead the Great Crusade while Big E went off to do his little silly webway project in the Imperial dungeon. But just how powerful was this balding menace? Well, I've been over this in the past, but once again, this version of Horus is incredibly hard to scale correctly. He's, for one, very highly regarded by his brother Primarchs, as they speak of him as a great warrior and that he is quote-unquote the best of them. For example, Corvus Corax thinks that only him and Sanguinius can stand against Angron in a fight. This kind of statement occurs a lot actually throughout the series, but it's almost impossible to rely upon these statements since it's all hearsay.
Sounds like a
Hoopla! Hoopla!
So in this example, no, this does not mean Angron is the third strongest Primarch, and no, it does not mean that Horus is one of, if not the strongest Primarch. This statement simply means that Corax thinks, emphasis on thinks, that Horus could take on Angron. That's like me saying, oh, I think I can fly, but obviously that's not the case, since I'll end up like a fucking pancake. There are really no true examples that he could take him on, so it's all just hearsay and theoretical. This issue of the Primarchs hyping up Horus makes power scaling Great Crusade Horus very difficult, since we don't see Horus in the Great Crusade battling foes a ton. He's more of an armchair general than anything, but with multiple Primarchs saying Horus could take on so-and-so and so-and-so, it gets tough. Black Library likes to follow the tell not show method, which becomes incredibly difficult when the Black Library is composed of entirely different authors who power scale Primarchs differently. Thus, all the statements made by different Primarchs could be contradictory. Spoiler for my Primarch ranking video, which if you haven't watched yet, go check it out. I put Great Crusade Horus in the 12th spot, just above Corvus Corax and just below Mortarion. Why? Like I just stated, LOL, the dude has hardly any prowess setting fights in this form, so he doesn't really get the chance to truly flex his guns, unlike the rest of his alternative versions on this list. Now, I know some of you annoying motherfuckers watching will want to say, what do you mean a heretical cow? You're not taking the hearsay into account? I get that. That's part of Horus's character, but if I were to take every hearsay into account, then making this video would be incredibly difficult. I think my brain would be burned out like a slave of Mommy Slanesh. So if one of you motherfuckers says anything about, well, dude, Horus so a greenskin, thus he could probably destroy the Khan, I will literally find you, come to your house, and shove a ball of socks in your ears. And let me tell you guys, you won't like it. With that said, I still do want to take a look at some of the feats that Horus does in the Great Crusade that will truly cement him as a middle-of-the-pack Primarch, at least making it easier to convey how strong his chaos-empowered variations are. Like I just said, Great Crusade Horus's durability, strength, and speed are very base and middle-of-the-pack compared to the other Primarchs. Let's start off with how strong he is. One of the greatest feats for base Horus, as he has no Primarch duels, as he and the Emperor's fights against the Greenskins from the short book Wolf of Ash and Fire. The orcs in this book are described as literal Primarch size, some even dwarfing the Emperor himself. Now mind you, these orcs are easily slaughtering Space Marines and have the Emperor surrounded. So Horus has to cut through them to get to the Emperor, easily slaughtering his way through them, even baning one at a certain point. This cultivates in Horus facing down against the Prime Orc, who he manages to slay easily. Now, slaying Primarch-sized greenskins isn't the best feat, but it definitely shows that he's capable in combat, as these orcs were even giving the Emperor problems. Honestly, there's not much more we see from this version of Horus, since he falls to chaos literally in the second book of the 54-book series. We do see him fight a Nurgle-possessed governor who wields an anthem, which we all know ends up with Horus getting mortally wounded. In Horus's defense though, the governor was wielding an incredibly deadly blade that, quote, if the name of the target was spoken to the blade, the weapon would become totally deadly to that being on an almost molecular level, producing poisons and toxins tailored specifically to them, while also guiding itself towards its target. So once it struck Horus, he was totally fucked, so to speak. But that's about it, guys. There's not honestly that much combat feats from this Horus version, which is a big bummer. We encounter the same issue with his durability and speed, to be honest. We see him fighting these same orcs, tanking blows from them and such. We don't really see anything outside of that. I mean, it's your usual Primarch tankiness. He's warding off plasma bolts and bolt around, something we all see the Primarchs do at one point or another. An interesting thing to note in regards to his durability is he was legit force choked out by Malcador the Sigillite in the short book Last Council. Malcador even suggests he could literally unmake the Primarch there and now. So we know for a fact base Horus scales far below Malcador the Sigillite. But where does he stand in regards to the other Primarchs? Like I discussed earlier, I feel like this version of Horus, although he has no feats to really back up that he's a great combatant, I feel like he's definitely square in the middle, very similar to my ranking in my Primarch video. He has decent enough feats that shows that he's at least competent in combat, unlike someone I know. Looking at you, Mr. Priest Boy, dip back on your knees. I would still leave him in the 12th spot amongst the Primarchs, simply due to the fact that I can't justify him being higher than the others like Rogel Dorn or Corvus Corax. But I feel like the just huge amount of hearsay and just overall the things the Primarchs say about him, I just can't simply put him so low on the list that he's close to Ferrus Manus or Logar. I have to take at least some of that hearsay as credibility because it's just said so goddamn much, but there's just not a lot of actual physical feats to back it up, outside of this one novel. So I feel like number 12 on the list of Primarchs is a pretty good scale for him. In terms of actually scaling him, I would still say that base Horus Lupercal or Great Crusade Horus is city level at the minimum, scaling up to world level, which, if you don't remember, means if I were to drop Great Crusade Horus Lupercal onto a city, he could level it, and maybe, possibly, he could destroy a whole planet. Before we jump to the next version of Horus, I do want to say, although these feats are not incredibly amazing, it's what I could find that shows Horus isn't a puddle of goo like some of the other Primarchs. He was elected Warmaster for a reason, mostly because of his charisma and generalship, but he had to at least be a decent combatant so his brothers wouldn't think to challenge him or his orders. But with that said, let's jump into the next variation of Horus, post Davin. Let's start off with describing what's currently going on at the time of Horus's fall. The Great Crusade is coming to a close, and the Emperor has retired to Terra to work on his secret Webway project. What a fucking nerd. Leaving Horus in control of the Great Crusade as the newly elected Warmaster. Having recently dealt with a sorrowful encounter with the Interrex, Horus has now returned to the moon of Davin to aid Erebus of the Word Bearers. Fuck you, Erebus. Little did he know he was walking into a trap. The Word Bearers and their Primarch Logar Aurelian for the past 50 years had been secret allies and worshippers of the ruinous powers, and they now sprung their trap, wounding Horus with a poisoned anthem blade, which modern medicine could not heal. Erebus, fuck him, convinced the Sons of Horus to take him to a serpent lodge on the world of Davin to heal him. First off, once again, fuck you, Erebus, you bald fuck. Secondly, what the fuck, guys? You seriously trusted this guy? Shame on you, Abaddon. So Horus undergoes a chaos ritual at the Serpent Lodge led by Erebus, who has disguised himself as Sejanus, Horus's favorite son who had just been slain in the previous book. Sejanus shows Horus visions of the future, where the Emperor rules a god and had discarded the Primarchs once they had outlived their usefulness. Erebus, who's a fucking cunt, also tells Horus that the Chaos Gods are peaceful with little interest in the Materium, and it was in fact the Emperor that was intent on destroying the realm on his quest for godhood. Magnus the Red, the Crimson King, Primarch of the 1,000 Sons, brother of Horus, and the man who never did anything wrong, attempted to intervene and save Horus from making a retarded decision, even revealing that Sejanus was indeed the cunt boy himself, Erebus, which in turn Horus revealed to both of them that he already knew that? Wait, what? Yeah, I'm as confused as you are. So retarded. So these strange visions and cryptic messaging convinced Horus that yes, his dad was evil and should be shanked with a prison spoon. Damn, Horus is truly a genius. Give this man a Nobel Peace Prize. So what happens pretty much is Horus makes his pact with Chaos, flips off Magnus, and begins to plan for his Horus Hersey. I will make a side note right here, as there seems to be some confusion on what would have happened if Horus had declined the offer from the ruinous powers. Well, it's pretty simple. He would have died. Actually, he was dead. The Chaos God simply took his soul and plunged it back into his body. So the variation of Horus we're looking at right now is post-Davin Horus that has just been revived by the ruinous powers. This variation lasts from the beginning of the heresy to Molech, where Horus receives his next chaos power boost. Horus is still himself, albeit more evil and obviously demented, but is still able to use his charm and wit to manipulate the 8 other Primarchs to his cause. Once again, we see the issue arise where we don't see a ton of this variation of Horus fighting similar to the Great Crusade version of him, but there still are some great feats that I do want to check out that show that post-Davin Horus has definitely grown in power compared to his old base form or Great Crusade Horus. So just how powerful is post-Davin Horus? So after Davin, it's clear Horus has definitely been touched by Chaos. As the chosen instrument of the Chaos Gods to destroy the Emperor, they have definitely gifted him some of their powers. I would say this version of Horus has a slight buff compared to his old base form. Now blessed with a dose of Chaos steroids, he is definitely stronger, faster, and more durable than Great Crusade Horus. This version is the beginning of Horus's journey to accumulate power on the way to his demise. Post-Davin Horus has a ton of awesome feats from the book Vengeful Spirit, where Horus begins his journey to Molech, the planet where the Emperor walked into the warp to bargain with the ruinous powers. The first feat I want to talk about occurs early on in the book when Horus, Mortarion, and Fulgrim are meeting after a large battle on the planet of Dwell. The scattered motherfucking legions, the goats, ambush the motherfuckers with gunships, guys. Gunships like it's Vietnam. Before I describe how awesome Horus is in this battle, I do want to address that the only reason why Horus and the other Primarchs survive this ambush is pure bullshit. It's pure plot armor bullshit. Horus even says he's surprised to be alive. What the hell? Come on, Black Library. Can the Shattered Legions please get a win? But I digress. Horus manages to destroy several of the Raptor gunships with the help of Demon Primarch Fulgrim and Mortarion, with the highlight of the fight being Horus jumping, let me tell you, jumping onto the back of a moving gunship wielding not one, but two weapons, both Worldbreaker and Silence, Mortarion's chief weapon, and absolutely obliterates the Raptor, crashing down and landing like he's in a fucking Marvel movie. What the fuck? Not only is the dude jumping hundreds of feet into the air, he's doing it fast enough to catch a flying Raptor with two massive weapons in his hand. Mind you, these weapons both weigh hundreds of tons. What the fuck, guys? It's an insane feat. Insane feat. Not only is Horus as fast or even faster than a flying gunship, he's able to destroy it super easily. Really shows that he's grown in power. After this, Horus begins his attack on Molech, hoping to access the warp gate and treat with the Chaos Gods similar to the Emperor. Making planetfall, Horus fights his way through thousands of planet guardsmen, hundreds of ultramarines, and then faces off against 10 knights of House Davin. For those who don't know what a knight is, they are towering bipedal engines of war that hail from the feudal worlds of the Imperium known as Night Worlds. A knight is incredibly powerful, able to crush hundreds of space marines, dozens of tanks, and can even block blows with its powerful power shields. They're even stronger when hunting in a pack, eliminating their one weakness, which is their ability to be pinned down by multiple enemies at once and destroyed, so when they're hunting together, their weaknesses are eliminated. Well, Horus faces 10 of them. Yes, 10 fucking knights. He single-handedly slays a few of them, and then helps destroy a few more with the help of the nearby possessed sons of Horus. What a crazy feat. He has the durability to tank blows from knights, which can level tanks and annihilate space marines, with also the strength to destroy said knights. It's a significant showing of how powerful post-Davin Horus has become. A final feat I want to touch on is Horus facing down a psychic guardian created by the Emperor to guard the warp gate. This psychic guardian mortally wounds several space marines before Horus destroys it with a single swing from Worldbreaker. As Primarchs scale far beyond space marines, I just wanted to discuss yet another adversary this Horus faces. Soon after, Horus enters the warp gate to treat with the Chaos Gods, which will see him ascend to his newest variation. But before we discuss post-Molech Horus, how does post-Davin Horus compare to the other Primarchs and, more importantly, the Emperor? This form of Horus definitely has increased in power, as seen with his feats of destroying knights and raptors with ease. When compared to Great Crusade Horus, I would say that post-Davin Horus attributes have all increased due to the presence of chaos, making him stronger, faster, and more durable. I know it's hard to compare these two versions together as there are just simply not enough feats from Great Crusade Horus, but I still feel like post-Davin Horus is stronger due to the fact that he has been buffed by the ruinous powers. Even going as far to say that this version of Horus is in the top half of all the Primarchs now. It's hard to put him over a few of them, such as Leman Russ or the Khan, who have some seriously amazing feats. At this point, I would probably put him in the same grouping as Vulcan. I think that's the most appropriate decision, so I think he's around 9 or 8 amongst all the Primarchs. I know some of you are yelling at me through your phones, and yes, I am an idiot, but I am an idiot using evidence. He destroys Knights and Raptors all by himself, but these do not compare to the Khan beating a Demon Primarch, especially Demon Primarch Mortarion, or Leman Russ wounding post-Molech Horus, who we're about to talk about. I would also like to note that in the book Fear to Tread, Horus remarks that he doesn't want to face Sanguinius and decides to cross a deal with a Cornite demon to have him killed in the Cygnus Prime books. This shows that this form of Horus scales far below Sanguinius still, and thus I feel like having him at the peak of the top 10 is a fair judgment call. So, for those yelling at me, go eat a pile of rotten eggs. Now we get to the Emperor, and honestly, this Horus doesn't stand a lick of a chance against him. Merely being buffed by the Chaos Gods is not enough to put him over the top, and the Emperor, who is a universally powered entity, would annihilate this Horus. All in all, I would put post-Davin Horus in the same-ish category as Great Crusade Horus, so city level scaling to world level, as Horus doesn't show any psychic powers yet, and still only relies upon his brute strength, something that is about to change after leaving Molech. Post-Molech Horus is an absolute beast, and it's not even close to the peak, to be honest. So what happened when Horus entered the warp gate at Molech? Well, time hardly passed between him entering and exiting the portal, but an unspecified amount of time passed within the warp, enough though to make Horus look aged to his sons of Horus Space Marines. Some context for why that is remarkable is that Primarchs are immortal and thus age incredibly slow. So Horus might have been in the fucking warp for hundreds, if not thousands of years. What was he doing in those 1,000 years? Well, he wasn't playing grab ass, that's for sure. Horus would later describe it as a time of trial. He essentially fought in the realm of chaos and created his own empire just to show his worth to the Chaos Gods. He basically did what a lesser demon would have done to ascend into the ranks of a higher demon, overthrowing and absorbing the powers of others to the point where that particular god recognizes them. In Horus's case, he did it for all 4 Chaos Gods at once, which is crazy. That is one of the biggest differences between the Emperor and Horus, at least in my opinion, as the Emperor went there as an equal and struck a deal with the gods, but Horus went there to serve and left as a pawn. Maybe that could even be considered his first step on the road to failure, as comparing Abaddon to Horus, Abaddon never makes this mistake. So Horus fights the warp and returns changed, having now fully been graced with the powers of chaos. Well, not fully, but we'll get to that in a second. This variation of Horus we'll be looking at is from Molech, obviously, to Olenor, where he finally awakens from his coma post-battle of Beta Garmon. This form has one of the longest runs, as Horus is in this variation for the majority of the war. After the events on Moloch, Horus continues his drive to Terra, but eventually is assaulted by Leman Russ, the Furry King, and his Space Wolves, who are hoping to assassinate the Warmaster and bring the Horus heresy to an end. I'll break down the fight between him and Russ in a second, which, spoilers, Horus wins, but is disastrously wounded. a wound that doesn't fully manifest till after the Battle of Betagarmon for some odd reason. I don't get it either, guys, but that's the Black Library for you. Horus slips into a coma and has to be saved by Malachers, who has realized that half of Horus's soul is still in the warp gate at Molech fighting the Chaos Gods. Thus, Horus has not really been fully graced with chaos and is in fact fighting against fully bending the knee to the ruinous powers. So to put it simply, Horus post-Molech has half of the potential power of the Chaos Gods due to his soul refusing to become a slave to the big four nerds. In the book Slaves to Darkness, Logar is stated to say, "I think that he is both too weak and too strong, my son. Too strong to submit to the full will of the gods. That is why he sits on his throne like a corpse at his own court. That is why the wound done to him by Rus bleeds. He is anointed of the gods. They have blessed him and exalted him higher than any other, higher than even I, their most devoted servant. They have given him the keys to existence, and yet he does not embrace them. He puts himself above them, and he is strong enough to resist, but not strong enough to triumph. The gods have given him power beyond anything they have bestowed on another, and yet he fights it. He resists the gods' favor even as they lift him up. Who could be strong enough to triumph against the gods? And without submitting, he will be torn apart. Without submitting, he will be too weak to defeat the Emperor, and then we will all have failed." Thus, this form is kind of stuck in limbo and has not reached its true potential. So how strong is this variation of Horus, and where does it compare to his brothers? Although this Horus is conflicted, he has still received an insane power boost as he has finally unlocked his inherent psychic powers. It's also suggested that his physical attributes have once again risen in strength. Sadly, this Horus is absent from the remainder of most of the Horus Heresy novels, so we don't really get to see this version flex his muscles a ton until the book Wolfsbane, where he faces down against Leman Russ. Wolfsbane is one of the last Horus Heresy novels, being the 49th and the 54 book series. As Horus's drive to Terra comes to a conclusion and the siege of Terra is about to begin, Leman Russ makes a daring yet very stupid move and attacks the Warmaster. Thus, we get to see post-Molech Horus fight Leman Russ, who I consider to be one of the stronger Primarchs, with the additional fact that Leman Russ wields the Spear of Russ, which is a power boost in my opinion. This weapon is imbued with the power of the Emperor himself, and it allows the user to show the truth to those it pierces. It also seems to have some anti-chaotic properties, so it's pretty much the anti-Horus weapon. So let's analyze this fight and the feats that Horus performs in this duel. So like I said, Russ attacks Horus and boards the vengeful spirit with thousands of space wolves with the goal of killing his chaos-infected brother. They encounter each other and Leman Russ is horrified with how smelly Horus has become. Thus, even while still struggling against accepting the full pact of the Chaos Gods, he is still very visibly corrupted. The fight begins, and it's very obvious that Leman Russ is outmatched. Leman Russ himself knows he can't win. Horus, using his new powers, beats the fuck out of the Wolf King and impales him with the Talon of Horus. Now, this is where we see one of the flaws of Horus Lupercal, especially now that he's been corrupted, which is his arrogance. Blinding him from Russ's true intentions, Russ breaks free from the Talon and plunges his spear into Horus's side. This is where we see the effects of the spear firsthand, as it appears to nullify the chaos blessings bestowed upon Horus for a short time, as he begins to age and wither, no longer having the ability to control his appearance. Horus and Leman Russ fight again, and once again Horus dominates the fight, mortally wounding Russ and causing him to flee. So what does this fight reveal? It honestly simply reveals just how powerful Horus has become. Leman Russ, in my opinion, is a top tier Primarch, and I rank him in the top 10 of all the Primarchs in regards to prowess. I believe he is incredibly capable as he is the Emperor's executioner, which is insane due to the fact that Horus honestly dismantles him in their fight, with Russ only managing to wound Horus with his incredibly powerful spear. The spear doesn't fully drive chaos from Horus, but seems to weaken him greatly. But still, this version of Horus prevails, truly showing how strong he has become in relation to his brother Primarchs. At this point, Horus post-Molech is undoubtedly one of the strongest Primarchs. I would say he's equal to strength with Magnus and just below Sanguinius. Once again, I would scale him to world level, but this time at the minimum, and at the maximum, I would say he is star level, meaning he could level a fucking star with his powers. He's still below the Emperor, but that gap is beginning to close. Now, if we compare post-Molech to post-Davin Horus, I would say post-Molech Horus has just awakened his true Psyker powers, and he has just begun to use the warp to his advantage, while compared to post-Davin Horus, who is still just using his brute strength. With that said, Russ did manage to wound him, a wound that begins to fester, and after several months reopens at the beginning of the book Slaves to Darkness as the Battle of Beta Garmon ends. Thus, we come to our next form, which I call Slave to Chaos Horus. This variation of Horus is only around for a short period of time, as it is quickly replaced by the next and final variation of Horus on my list. Like I stated above, post-Molech Horus is still conflicted and does not fully have the powers of chaos due to him not fully giving himself in to the ruinous powers. So how does Slave to Chaos Horus come about fixing this issue? Well, after Horus's wound reopens after the Battle of Beta Garmon and Slaves to Darkness, he slips into a coma like Rick from The Walking Dead. The sons of Horus absolutely begin to panic as the traitor Primarchs assemble at Ulanor. Malachus, one of Horus's favorite sons, decides that he has to enter Horus's mind via a chaos ritual and see what the fuck is going on. What he discovers is something we already talked about, which is that part of Horus's soul is still at the warp gate at Molech, refusing to give in to the chaos gods. Horus talks to Malachus about his refusal to submit to yet another tyrant. Horus legit talks about how he wants to decide his own fate and that he's tired of serving others. First with the Emperor and now with the Chaos Gods, Horus is kind of done being a fucking loser. He's just kind of over all of it, but Malachus, being the silly guy that he is, kind of says, "Fuck you, Horus," and stabs Horus's soul in the location Russ gave him his wound, allowing the two parts of Horus's soul to reconnect at the cost of his life. Horus awakens back on the vengeful spirit, fully committed to the Chaos Gods, hence the reason I call this variation Slave to Chaos. Horus essentially has become a meat puppet for the Chaos Gods in this form, but when you have the full blessings of 4 Chaos Gods, you're kinda broken. We quickly see Horus use these new abilities on his fellow Primarch brother, Lorgar. Ooh. So why is Lorgar fighting Horus? Well, Horus has been fighting drug addiction in the warp. Lorgar has been on a side quest with the ultimate goal of dethroning Horus and taking the mantle of Warmaster. He has recruited Fulgrim forcibly to his side by discovering his secret name and has sacrificed a ton of slaves to control a psychic attack, which we call a psychic scream, which he will use to fight Horus. Lorgar is confident that this psychic scream will fuck up Horus and Fulgrim will be able to kill him easily. So flash forward, all the traitors have met on Ulanor and Lorgar's plan is ready to betray Horus. Unfortunately for the bald priest fuck, Horus has been informed of his little plot, and when they do all convene, Horus is ready. Without hesitation, he surprises the priest and begins to beat the fucking shit out of him. First with his fists, and then Worldbreaker. We also see Horus use his psychic abilities for the first time, throwing Lorgar around like a fucking ragdoll, eventually banishing him instead of killing him because he wanted to prove a point, ? I don't know why he didn't kill him. It doesn't really make any sense, but a lot of stuff from this book series doesn't make a lot of sense, so let's just go with it. After banishing him, he commands the traitors to launch their final attack on Terra. So this duel between Horus and Logar is incredibly one-sided, but we do see some amazing feats from Horus that truly show that he is the undisputed strongest Primarch at this point. Yes, you heard that right. I believe that this variation is the beginning of when Horus has become an absolute S-tier, unbeatable Goku-like figure in the Warhammer universe. Having completely accepted chaos, Horus is no longer conflicted and now has the full power of the ruinous pantheon with him. This influx of power is passively manipulating reality itself, as those close to Horus during his fight with Logar see his form constantly changing. Here's a quote from Slaves to Darkness, just to really give you guys a picture. The Warmaster's form flickered, blinking between images, a towering figure of black shadow, a face lit by ghostlight, a warlord clad in wolfskins, his hands and face red with blood, a king cloaked in sable and crowned with a burning laurel, a cloaked prince in pearl white and gold plate. Each image slid into being in a way, each as real as the one that had just passed. We see this similar effect on reality with the Emperor, as he has such a strong psychic might that no one can comprehend his true form, similar to now what is happening with Horus. As you know, all of his forms throughout reality are beginning to shift and change, and it makes the people in proximity to him unable to truly see what Horus's form is now. We can easily make the assumption now that with the Chaos God's blessing, Horus is at least near or very close to the Emperor's power. I would easily think that this Horus would kill any of his brother Primarchs at this point due to his enhanced strength, speed, and durability due to the Chaos blessings. And now with the added effect of psychic powers, which could stretch from simple manipulation as he shows, or even to reality manipulation. We just don't simply know because this form lasts for such a quick snippet in the series, but the limits of this Horus are crazy. One last thing I want to add is it would take a great deal of power to control a Primarch psychically, which we've only seen through Malkador and the Emperor, two of the strongest psychers in the universe, due to the weight a Primarch's soul has upon reality, thus showing once again how strong Horus has become. So when does Horus enter his next variation or his final form? It's honestly hard to say, especially since I created these variations myself, LOL. But I would like to say that this Horus truly becomes what I call God Emperor Horus at the beginning of the Siege of Terra, having to seemingly mastered his psychic abilities between the mustering at Ulanor and the beginning of the Siege of Terra. And let me tell you guys, this Horus is broken as fuck. Where do I begin with God Emperor Horus? First off, holy fuck. The dude is broken. At the final confrontation with the Emperor, Horus is the literal definition of Goku and is way stronger than the Emperor. The dude could probably have sex with my wife and I wouldn't be able to stop him. He's that strong. That makes no sense, but I thought it'd be really funny if I said it, and now I regret it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. How did Horus get here? What even occurs during the Siege of Terra? The Siege of Terra, which takes place over the course of 9 novels, with the final book being the end and the death, which is broken into 3 parts. What occurs is what you expect, to be honest. The traitors slowly but surely break down the walls of the defenders, and it's all looking quite grim until Horus Lupercal decides to lower the shields on the vengeful spirit, inviting the Emperor and his brothers a chance to slay him. Wait, why the fuck would Horus do that? Why would he lower his shields? Well, let me tell you. As soon as the traitors arrived in the system, Horus begins his psychic attack on the Emperor. This is the first instance of him being seen to know the knowledge of the immaterial, knowledge he continues to gather throughout the siege as he constantly attacks the Emperor psychically in the hopes to weaken his psychic barrier on Terra and in the Webway. This is the first feat we see from the God Emperor Horus, as he seems to have mastered his newfound psychic abilities extremely fast. In fact, Horus spends most of the siege in the warp, organizing the attacks and psychically attacking the Emperor. But most importantly, Horus seems to be gathering more and more power throughout the siege. This backseat role would finally change when Horus would receive a warp transmission from the Blue Papa Smurf himself, Rabute Gilliman, who was a mere 9 hours away from Terra. Realizing it was now or never, Horus rose from his throne in Lupercal's court and returned to the Vengeful Spirits Bridge to lower the shields for his ultimate trap. I do want to cover some impressive feats that Horus has before his duel with the Emperor and Sanguinius. First off, this form of Horus is suggested to be incredibly durable, with a notable feat during the Lost and the Damned is him being in the presence of Demon Prince Mortarion, who, mind you, is infected with Nurgle, and thus his presence alone is enough to kill mortals and even cause Space Marines to vomit, faint, and in some cases pass out. Horus doesn't even seem to notice, showing that he's not even affected by his brother's stinky musk. A second feat I want to look at is just how much warp power Horus seems to have. Due to the influx of power he has, his throne room, Lupercal's court, has become its own pocket realm. Yeah, you heard that right. Completely breaking away from time and space itself. In fact, to add to that, the whole Vengeful Spirit has begun to morph and change as Horus's warp corruption has begun to mutate the Vengeful Spirit itself. This influx of warp powers causes Horus's form to constantly change. The effect of this is that mortals around him simply go mad or in some cases die due to his presence alone. A third and final feat I want to take a peek at is at this time during the Siege of Terra, time and space have completely frozen. Now, this may just be because of the general warp nonsense that is occurring during the Siege of Terra, but I feel like it's slightly implied that this is due to Horus's simple presence, that reality itself is beginning to break down as time has completely stopped moments before the Emperor boards the Vengeful Spirit, which once again implies that Horus has done this on purpose to ensure that Gilliman does not reach Terra before his confrontation with his father. So although Horus does not physically fight in the siege till the very end, he has quite a few feats throughout the siege in the immaterial, which shows that he is a god. From what we can see from the last time we see him in Slaves to Darkness, he has grown immensely more powerful, becoming a psychic being of unrivaled capabilities. This is who the Emperor, Rugaldorn, Constantine Valdor, Sanguinius, and the allied Space Marines and Custodes face when they teleport aboard the Vengeful Spirit. Well, Horus immediately shows how proficient he has become with warp magic by scattering the whole Loyalist party to different parts of his flagship, which, remember what I said, has become a pocketed realm in the warp. Thus, time, space, and physics don't apply here, making it incredibly dangerous for the Loyalists as the ship is completely in the warp. This feat can be easily glossed over, but in reality, Horus was able to manipulate the Emperor himself, 2 Primarchs, and a horde of Custodes and Space Marines to different locations in the warp. No small feat in itself. Rugaldorn himself was trapped in an endless desert, implied to be directly linked to the Blood God's domain, as Khorne tempts Dorn for what seems to be endless centuries. Immediately after scattering the Loyalists, he launches a psychic attack upon the Custodes guarding the Emperor, controlling them to attack their favorite guy. This in itself is a crazy feat. The lore of Warhammer 40K says that the Custodes are not corruptible and are near perfect beings, and Horus seems to take control of them without any effort and make them attack the being they've sworn to protect just like that. Wow. The Emperor is able to dispatch these Custodes, but still the feat remains. With the Loyalists completely scattered, Horus deliberately leads his brother Sanguinius towards him with the sole purpose of attempting to turn him to the ruinous powers. I do want to take a quick detour here for a moment to say that this Horus may be broken in power, but his mind is absolutely fucked. Like he just huffed 3 pounds of glue. Horus has begun to become delusional, talking to people that are long dead or aren't there, so he truly believes that Sanguinius will bend the knee to him and join his war against the Emperor. Absolute retard. So Sanguinius finally comes upon Horus in the throne room and is distraught as fuck. His favorite brother looks like a fucking muppet. Horus and Sanguinius fight, and Sanguinius manages to land several blows on his traitorous brother, but it's revealed from Horus's own perspective that he isn't even trying, like at all, simply hoping that Sanguinius will eventually see how powerful he has become and that he'll surrender and join him. But we all know that Sanguinius is too fucking awesome to team up with a bald cunt. Thus, as Horus senses the Emperor approaching, he ends the duel quickly. Putting on his try-hard gloves, he first breaks his wings and legs, swiftly plucking him from the air and smashing him into the ground like straight out of an anime cutscene, followed by brutally hammering Sanguinius in with Worldbreaker. Then he finally stabs him with his talon. Guys, I kid you not, this duel is brutal as fuck. Sanguinius gets dominated once Horus begins to try, and it's incredibly sad seeing the magnificent Hawkboy get pretty much bent over and fucked in the ass. Thus, Sanguinius dies, and Horus prepares for his confrontation with his daddy. So what can we gather from this ultimate duel between brothers? Once again, if you have not watched my Primarch ranking, I would recommend checking out how I power scale each of the Primarchs. But spoiler, yet again, I put the magnificent Hawkboy as number 1. Easily the strongest base Primarch in my opinion, excluding demon Primarchs and obviously Horus. Sanguinius destroys titans, demons, thousands of space marines, lesser demons, and other beings, with his most notable conquest being his defeat of a literal demon Primarch, which is Angron. So this same version of Sanguinius fights Horus, and it's not even a fight. Horus pummels him once he actually starts fighting, truly showing that he scales far above any of the Primarchs, like by a ton. The gap is so far in between, it's insane. They're in completely different leagues. But where does Horus rank in relation to the approaching Emperor? Let's go over how strong the Emperor is first. Like I stated earlier, the Emperor is a universal being. He is and will be always the strongest human ever, as his psychic powers are just simply insane. I don't want to go too in-depth on the Emperor, as this is a power scaling video on Horus, but I feel like to truly show how strong God Emperor Horus is, we need to look at the Emperor of Mankind's powers. For one, he is a perpetual, meaning he can never truly die, as his soul will remain anchored to the material world and ensure that regardless of any wounds or blows, he will return to life or regenerate. Secondly, the Emperor is the strongest Psyker in the Imperium, able to do insane feats with his powers. From making a whole Space Marine Legion kneel before him, to holding the webway closed against the power of all 4 Chaos Gods, or just simply creating things from nothing. The Emperor is truly a beast. Due to these insane psychic abilities, the Emperor's attributes are all increased way beyond that of a human being, and in my opinion, beyond even the Primarchs, as he is seen fighting with blinding speed and seemingly has the ability to teleport. He also has the strength to break moons and the durability to take blows from higher demons that are cutting through reality. I really want to emphasize that the Emperor can seem to make anything he wants occur within the material world due to his powers being reality altering. What a god. So this same Emperor knows that Horus is stronger than him. So Horus is legit that freaking strong, possessing even stronger Psyker powers than the Emperor himself due to the roids given to him by the ruinous powers. Thus, as he boards the vengeful spirit, he decides to take the final solution that could beat Horus. So here's where I want to analyze the term the Dark King. The Dark King is a theoretical 5th Chaos God that has been prophesied by both the Eldar and the humans throughout history, but it is first mentioned overtly during the final stages of the Siege of Terra. The Dark King represents the drive for complete destruction without reason or aim. At first, Horus believes that he is the destined being to become the Dark King and is attempting to use humanity to birth him to godhood, similar to Slaanesh using the Eldar. But in reality, the Emperor is the supposed Dark King. Out of desperation, the Emperor drank greatly from the warp on a scale previously unseen of, taking the form of a lightning-sheathed sphere of obsidian. What the fuck? The Emperor's power was so great that he unintentionally slew all the custodians around him, turning them into literal walking burnt corpses. What the fuck, Big Daddy E? At this point, the Emperor is beginning to ascend to a motherfucking chaos god. However, the Emperor is confronted by a group of unlikely heroes. This group of unlikely heroes convinces the Emperor to shed the mantle of the evolving Dark King, causing a blast of power to sweep across both Terra and the Vengeful Spirit, banishing almost all the warp madness spread by the traitors. So the Emperor goes and faces Horus at his current level, which once again is far weaker than his corrupted son. The easiest thing to draw from this is that the Emperor had to literally ascend to godhood to beat God Emperor Horus. Crazy. Absolute craziness. Finally, we come to the ensuing titanic battle between the Emperor and Horus, and let me tell you guys, it's crazy. This duel is fought across both the material and the immaterial realms, across both time and space, and in several dimensions simultaneously as the Chaos Gods watch on. Fully empowered by the ruinous pantheon, Horus was able to match and then surpass the Emperor's own psychic might. What began as a physical contest of sword against maul escalated into a clash across time as they found themselves assailing one another on Chthoniya, ancient Terra, Ulanor, and many other planets from their past and future. Horus and the Emperor began to attack one another in their own memories, and finally the battle manifested as a motherfucking card game.
You serious?
Yes, guys, yes. The most important part of this video is telling you that the Emperor dueled Horus with his Yu-Gi-Oh cards. It's canon, guys. I repeat, it's canon. I hope the Emperor summons Exodia before it's too late. At the end of all these duels, the Emperor is defeated in both the immaterial and the material realms, as he is finally overwhelmed by Horus's barrage of attacks and it collapses. A quick analysis I want to do on this portion of the fight is that the Emperor and the Horus are literally fighting beyond our reality, clashing through time and space and shattering the laws of physics as they duel, truly showing that Horus has become a universal being similar to the Emperor himself. But like I said before, Horus is beyond this Emperor, explicitly having infinite power while the Emperor only has finite power. As any injury the Emperor makes on Horus is ignored, and all the hits Horus lands give outright kill aspects, bleeding the Emperor's soul from his buried body, meaning Horus has the power to attack the Emperor's buried immortal soul. Returning back to the fight, we see that Horus has dragged the Emperor towards the fifth throne he has constructed alongside those of the four Chaos Gods, proclaiming that he will punish the Emperor by forcing him to be his slave. However, the Emperor uses this opportunity to absorb some of Horus's dark power to launch a vicious counterattack upon him. However, the catch-22 is the Emperor has only absorbed a small portion to avoid being corrupted. Thus, Horus is able to easily overpower the Emperor once more and stabs him in the jugular. At this point in the duel, we kind of see the same thing occur, where Horus is so close to killing the Emperor, but he is saved by some third party, and the Emperor resumes the fight only to get fucked in the ass quickly afterwards. What we can gain from this back and forth is that Horus is seen to have insane regenerative abilities and can similarly not die to any physical blow. Now, this is pretty much where we see the end of Horus displaying his powers, as he once again beats the Emperor senseless. At this point, the fight is kind of over, and the Emperor and Horus just start playing grab ass, as the Emperor loses over and over again, but Horus is kind of just fucking around with him. So after the third time of, beating the Emperor and then, a third Deus Ex Machina saves him, Horus is convinced somehow, weirdly convinced, to discard all of his warp power and fight the Emperor as his base Primarch form. With the Emperor weakened and Horus returned to close to base Horus, the two kind of beat the shit out of each other, with Horus pulling out the Emperor's eye, burning his hair, and tearing off his arm, while the Emperor blinds the fuck out of him by showing him his unused porn stash. The Warmaster falls into agony as he desperately tries to cloak himself in his warp power once more. It's like, dude, why did you do that in the first place? You should have just kept your power. Classic villain, always gotta glow. However, much to Horus's horror, he discovers that the Chaos Gods are now teaching him a lesson by deliberately denying him the power of the warp. This leads to Horus coming to a realization that he has never truly been in control, and the ruinous powers were treating him as a fucking slave. Well, go figure, buddy. Thus, the Emperor, with great regret, stabs Horus and channels all of his psychic being into the blow, unmaking Horus entirely. Wow, what an end for the arch traitor. So that about wraps up this video, but I do want to give a final summary of the powers and feats we see from God Emperor Horus during the Siege of Terra, just to truly show what a beast that mother hecker is. Horus, for one, has incredible psychic powers, able to communicate with the traitors across vast distances and spaces, as well as the fact that he's able to psychically attack the Emperor in the warp, and powerful enough to damage the Emperor with psychic abilities, like cutting off his arm, burning his hair, and pulling out his eye, which we never see previously. So it's a pretty insane feat that the Emperor gets this fucked up. A final thing I do want to say is Horus is able to fracture time and space itself, something we don't see any other character in Warhammer 40K do, to my knowledge, which is crazy. Outside of his psychic abilities, Horus has incredible strength, durability, and speed due to both the blessings of chaos and the warp itself, which seems to have given him invulnerability and constant regeneration. Essentially, God Emperor Horus can control reality at his whim and is 100% at least scaled to high universal or even beyond that, meaning this version of Horus can manipulate the universe and probably could unmake it, which is insane. I would go as far as to say that this version of Horus is the strongest character we ever see in Warhammer 40K, due to his ability to manipulate reality, time and space, and just the universe as a whole. What a long video, guys. Holy cow. Wait, that's me. Can't you tell I'm becoming delusional after recording and editing this video? But I still had a ton of fun, and I hope you agreed with my opinion. That said, it is my opinion, so you can obviously disagree with me, but I don't really care because I'm right and you're wrong. I'm going to try to get the next video out, which is going to be about Ferrus Manus, the Headless Wonder. It's going to maybe take a week or two to get that one out, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. As always, guys, if you liked the video, hit that like button and subbed if you're not subbed already. I really put a ton of effort into this video, and I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I really do, and I hope I'm mostly correct. I think God Emperor Horus is a crazy character with crazy feats, and I hope you guys agree. But as always, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and stay milked, lads and ladies. I'll see you in the next video.